Since you guys aren't in the same place, and especially with the pandemic, did you find new ways to work remotely that were beneficial or that you hadn't thought of before?
So it's sort of interesting because Nick and I lived pretty close to one another for I don't know, like 8 or 9 years, something like that. I Nick's always been in New Jersey. I was in Jersey for a few years, and then in New York. So it was like it was still a hour and a half commute. We weren't seeing each other every day, but a few times a week.
Right.
But at this point, we've known each other so long. We know like what our strengths and weaknesses are as producers.
Mm,
That when I moved back to Virginia, which is where I grew up, like 5, almost 6 years ago now, um, we at first we were doing a lot of like virtual like screen share and streaming audio and like Skype and all this stuff to try to do like
right.
in person sort of sessions. But we got to a point where we just like sort of divvied up the tasks a lot of times. Like I would get to a certain point in a track and hand it off to Nick, and he would mix from there. Um,
Right.
and it's I don't know how well that would work for all duos, but the fact that we just know each other so well, the transition wasn't hard, and we were doing it years leading up to the pandemic. So when the
Yeah.
pandemic hit, like
Yeah.
not a lot changed.
Right.
We still like I don't know. We haven't had like an in person studio session since probably February of last year of 2020.
Wow.
And there is something special to being in the same room. Like I tend to be very methodical, precise. I work on this sound until it's done, and then I move on to the next sound. Which when there's another person in the room is like the worst, and that's not how we want to work. So when Nick's in the room with me, we fly through stuff. Like in a 6 hour
Right.
session, we'll get through 4 tracks versus 6 hours of me at home. I get through like 20% of a track sometimes. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
there's something to being like in the room with another person, but we have figured out a way to divvy up the work.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
to Danny's point, he was talking about the thing the other day where he was like frustrated about a record. I think I know which record it was. Because like when he sent it to me, I heard stuff wrong with it that was not even like I wasn't even considering anything that he thought about that was wrong with the record. I was just looking at it like big picture, like this groove and this vibe and these sections wasn't quite right, whatever. And he was like, nah, did you hear like this bass line when this changed, it didn't match that chord. It went by so quick, like, because I was just like kind of, listening. I don't know. I was probably doing something while I was listening. So I was just
right.
like listening for the vibe and shit and the groove. And like, he's like, no. These are the things that are wrong with it. And I can't figure out how we should fix these particular things. So like the benefit of a duo is just
Yeah.
like that stuff where one person is maybe looking at the finer details, which contribute to the big picture, but then also the big picture matters too, because if you get all those chords right, but the vibe as a whole doesn't feel right, then none of that shit matters. So
Right.
we always advocate for duos, even if the person's not up front in the duo. I think there's something to be said about somebody doing a task that you isn't necessarily your strong suit, whether that's the business side, going out and networking to get your brand out there, or it's the music side. Maybe you're not a technical producer or like a super strong musician, but you have the right ear for that stuff. Like you got to find somebody to make up the gap.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, having a duo in a lot of situations is good, and it's just a yin and yang thing, and you can
Yeah.
play off each other and help each other.